translating it into a sort of task-oriented approach and
a practical approach, yeah.
And as a culture, just taking science, for example, and our technological approach to how we go forward, and I have to say that the mainstream sustainability movement is very, very focused on technological approaches. So even if we would just said that was the right approach, then what this lesson tells us was that we should have our technologists and scientists, they should have enforced meditation, if you like, to take them out of the left hemisphere approach, to give them a chance to have these greater insights that might lead to dramatic breakthroughs in renewable energy technologies or whatever it might be. But that, of course, doesn't happen very often. So it's really, I'm not saying left is bad and right is good, and I'm not saying it's about one, the right hemisphere being the right thing for everything. What I'm talking about is the relationship between these two different tools, if you like.
Well, it's a use of both of them by the sound of it, because if you've got one and not the other, you're a bit lost, and vice versa.
Yeah, so I feel that if we just take a left hemisphere approach, we just will not understand sustainability, because it's about big, complex, big picture issues and the relationships of huge systems. And what also tends to happen is that I think fear is very much related to the left hemisphere. So when people feel frightened, it's one of the reasons they feel frightened is with these issues, is they feel so big and complicated and overwhelming. And that's because they're in the left hemisphere mode. So they're trying to deal with these big, complicated issues with a part of their brain that can only deal with one thing at a time. So of course it's overwhelmed, and its response to that is fear. Whereas if people are able to be taken into a different state of mind, then they can actually see sustainability issues as an opportunity to create a much better world, if you like, in simple terms, where we have ways of living and ways of meeting our needs that are sustainable.
It seems to be that the reference point is, and this is something we've looked at a lot on Conscious TV. We have a whole series of programs on non-duality, and the reference point is that we are all expression of one thing, true nature, whatever we call it, being, there's different words for it. And our adventures on this planet are all to do with expression of one thing.
Yes. But
we get caught up in our conditioning, believing that we are completely separate. And in one way, it's true, and in the day-to-day adventures we are separate sometimes. A lot of the time we are separate. But we lose this sense of the fact we're actually a part of something much bigger.
Yes.
And that seems to be at the bottom of the problem here.
Yes. There's a book I've read recently called Time's Up by a chap called Keith Farnish, and he's basically saying, there is no future for industrial civilization, but what he's also saying is one of the reasons we are in the situation we're in is because of the tools of disconnection, what he calls the tools of disconnection, which are the distractions that occupy us and that keep us in this way of experiencing life that makes us think of ourselves as separate and disconnected, and therefore we pursue a certain path which is about me, whether it's me as an individual or me as a species. We think of human beings as the most important thing. And if we reconnect, then it's just plainly obvious. It's not even a question that there is nothing that's more important than anything else. The only thing that's important is the whole, and we are nothing but dependent on that whole. It's what created us, whatever view of creation you have. It's the whole that created us, and it provides our needs. We can't get our needs met from anywhere else than the planet that we're living on.
Yeah, and the trouble is we're spending a lot of our life trying to make ourselves happier, because we feel if we become happier,
Yes.
well, it's an intelligent thing to do, but we look for more of the same to become happy, and that's another way we're using up all the resources on the planet. We want more and more and more, and it's true if you are starving and you've got nowhere to live, more is going to make you happier. But it becomes this point where it has increasingly little effect having more.
And I've written about this in a parallel book to sustainability, consciousness and climate change. That came out of work that I've termed the Earth Dweller's Guide to Sustainability, which has looked at social aspects to the situation, economic and environmental, the big three issues, as well as consciousness, the individual and civilization. And in that social and economic section, my perspective is actually we're not looking for happiness, we're looking for less unhappiness.
Well, that's the other thing that we do. We actually,
which is a very important difference.
We move towards what we perceive as pleasure and away from what we perceive as pain.
Yes.
That's the other side of it,
But there's not that many people that I would say are fundamentally happy. There are people who've been successful in becoming less unhappy or getting marginal improvements, but typically our culture is much better at creating mental and psychological pain and suffering and physical pain and suffering than it is health and happiness, which is insane on some level, and takes us back to the vision of our culture. Why on earth do we not have a vision of our culture for the future that is embedded in wisdom, happiness, healthiness? That would be a sane and wise vision for the future, and then we could find the practical first steps to take us there, which would be that marriage between left and right hemisphere, develop the vision using right hemisphere experience, and then take advantage of the pragmatic left hemisphere approach to work out the practical steps to get us there.
So why do you think the left and right hand side of the brain have got out of balance?
My two reference points for this is the work of Tony Wright I've mentioned in his book Left in the Dark.
I'll show it up here because I have a copy of the book here, Left in the Dark, by Tony Wright, and somebody else as well.
Graham Ginn, who really did the writing side, all the thinking is from Tony. And to put this in context, Tony, without resources behind him, has managed to get some incredible endorsements for this book from world authorities in a variety of areas, people saying this is an entirely new way of understanding our evolution and human origins, and it will change things. Whether that will be realised